Hi guys, welcome to week 3. This week what we're focusing on is going to be chapters 5 and chapter 6. Now for the day 1 video, what I'm going to focus on is chapter 6. And that's really dealing with the office environment itself and the safety of the office environment. When we talk about the office environment, like I said, we really need to focus on the safety not only of ourselves, but of our patients and our coworkers. Those safety measures we need to talk about include things such as general safety, employee safety, emergency plans, and handling biohazardous materials and bloodborne pathogens. So let's talk about each one of those individually. So when we talk about general safety, the big thing that's going to come into play here is OSHA. Now, OSHA, or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is a governmental agency that's responsible for the safety of all employees that work in companies here in the U.S. OSHA has set a lot of strict standards to help keep employees safe, and some of those standards are things as providing training, doing outreach, having proper education, establishing partnerships, and encouraging continual improvements throughout the company and in the workplace. But OSHA is not just concerned with bloodborne pathogens. We learned in week 2 that they created the bloodborne pathogens, but that's not their only concern. It's also things that can cause any sort of workplace hazard, anything that can put employees at risk. Some disasters, things like fires, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, and explosions. Now, some of those things you don't have a whole lot of control over, but you will want to protect your patients. But in the event that there is a fire, there's 2 acronyms I want you to remember. The first one is PASS, P-A-S-S. So this is when you're actually dealing with a fire extinguisher. You're going to pull the pin, you're going to aim the hose where the fire is, and then you're going to squeeze the handle and sweep side to side to put the fire out. The second one is the acronym RACE, R-A-C-E. That's going to stand for rescue. Get out all patients that you can and yourself to safety. Alarm. Set the alarm so that way we alert the authorities. Contain. If you can close the fire off, please do so, as long as it doesn't put you in danger. And extinguish if possible. Okay? Extinguish or evacuate is really the E, because you want to get out to safety there. The next one we're going to talk about is employee safety. So safety is really the responsibility of each and every staff member. Staff and employees need to be consistently aware of their surroundings and try to avoid all possible hazards. When we say this, we also need to implement all the safeguards that are going to keep us safe and keep our patients safe. So that could be following those OSHA bloodborne pathogen standards, the universal precautions, the standard precautions, and the transmission-based precautions. It could be wearing the appropriate protective equipment that we need to. And it's also using the proper body mechanics. So when I say proper body mechanics, I mean those ergonomic changes, making sure you're sitting with your feet flat on the floor at a 90-degree angle. The screen for computers is spaced out from your eyes so you don't cause any squinting. But it's also things like when you need to pick up materials, stooping down instead of bending with your back, lifting things up firmly, and knowing that if it's too heavy for you as one person to get help to help you move an object or lift an object. Using your center of gravity for carrying materials. Okay. Again, that kind of goes back to not using lift with your legs, not with your back. If you can push or pull something rather than lift it and load it, that's also a good way to keep yourself safe. You want to avoid reaching for things or twisting quickly for things. You want to be able to grab them quickly and make sure that they are within your reach. Now, any time that there is some sort of unusual event and an accident does occur, you need to fill out an incident report. Some examples of things that will cause incident reports. Maybe you have a wet floor sign and you slip, or a patient slips, an accidental needle stick, a dropping of a vial and you get cut. All of those are unusual events. They don't occur on a daily basis, so we would have to fill out that incident report for them. The next topic is the emergency plan. And we did talk about this a little bit in our PowerPoint from last week in Module 2, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with it here. So OSHA does require that each medical office have a written exposure plan, and what that is it's really a plan that's helped put in place to help minimize the employee's exposure to certain infectious materials. Like I said last week, the plan does need to be written out, and it does get reviewed on an annual, yearly basis. It also requires that employees and employers be part of that annual review, and if there are changes that need to be made, they come from both parties, not just the employer. An exposure control plan really does consist of 3 separate parts. Part 1 is the exposure determination. This is a list of all the jobs within the facility that are at risk for exposure to potentially infectious materials. The second is the method of compliance. So this is the specific measures that the employer takes and employee takes to help reduce the risk of exposure. And the final piece is going to be the post-exposure follow-up, or post-exposure prophylaxis. This is the follow-up and the evaluation that happens after an exposure occurs. This could be things such as seeking medical treatment. It could be that risk management that we talked about, or that risk counseling. It's also going to be you seeking that treatment. We're going to keep that post-exposure record on file for 30 years. So even if you are no longer working for the company, they still have to keep your record for that 30 years in case there ever was some sort of an audit. They would need to have records saying what happened and what was the exposure follow-up. You guys in class this week will be making a exposure control plan, and then you will be presenting it in day 2, so more to come on that. And the last piece is handling those biological wastes and bloodborne pathogens. Now, we did talk a lot, and we had a bloodborne pathogen assessment that we did in Module 2, so I'm not going to go into bloodborne pathogens. But I do want to talk a little bit about handling the biological or medical waste. So when we talk about medical waste, it's really divided into 4 major categories. The first category is a solid. So that is any sort of material that comes maybe from patient rooms or surgery sites, those solid materials that you need to dispose of. The second category is a chemical. This can be any sort of germicide or cleaning agent that is used during a cleaning process, but it also has pharmaceuticals that fall under this, so anytime you need to dispose of medications that are no longer being taken. The third major type is a radioactive, and this is anything that has materials that could be radioactive. Some of those materials could be things that contain iodine number 123 and iodine number 131, so different types of dyes that we use and contrast that we use. And the final piece is called infectious. So this is any material that could be potentially carrying any sort of diseases. When you are handling these types, regardless of what type of material you are dealing with, you must always follow the Material Safety Data Sheet, or the MSDS. This is an informational sheet that offers some basic information regarding the safety and the health of the employee when you're storing, using, or disposing of materials. You will see them sometimes as an actual written out sheet, and sometimes They are a label on the back of a chemical or material. Now when you look at that, you will see the MSDS label comes in 4 colors. It's a little diamond and it's 4 different colors. Those 4 colors each represent something different. The red color will represent flammability, or the likelihood of things catching on fire. The blue represents health hazards, so any sort of health hazard that may happen if ingested or inhaled. Third, or the yellow color, is a reactivity or explosives, so anytime there could be that kind of a reaction. And the final color, white, represents the PPE requirements that are needed while using that material. The MSDS labels or the written informational sheets should always be easily accessible for all employees to access. So anytime that you have something that could potentially be in need of an MSDS, that should be easily accessible for you to obtain and look at. Our lab does have an MSDS binder, but I'm not going to tell you where it is because you're going to have to look for it in the lab this week. Alright guys, so as always, I will have all of the materials that you need for class this week printed prior to class, so you do not need to bring anything to class. You don't have to print anything off. I know some of you like to keep it for your own study purposes later, and that's completely fine. This is where I'm going to stop our Day 1 video. And after class ends on Day 1, I will put up the Day 2 video for you for this week. So hang tight and stay tuned. Have a wonderful week, guys, and I will see you on Day 1. Bye-bye.